Good vibes and acts of kindness, everybody. Welcome to the ESPN Esports League of Legends program we like to call Rift Rewind. Thank you very much for watching us on ESPN Esports on Twitch, the ESPN app, on Twitter or YouTube, or maybe you're listening to us in podcast form. Wherever you pick up your audio, we appreciate you consuming our content. We have a lot to get to, but there is a theme to tonight's program, and that theme is this. Just what the is going on in the LEC and the LCS. We're going to get there. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to unpack with Emily, Jacob, Tyler, and myself. Little bit of a reminder, if you're a trivia fan, join us after this show concludes. Immediately afterwards, we have our League of Legends Trivia Night. You can join in the Twitch extension. No matter where you're watching or listening to us, come to Twitch. After this show, Rift Rewind is over. We play some trivia. It's a ton of fun. As we like to start the show, however, here on Rift Rewind, what we loved and what we hated this week in League of Legends. It is Emily's turn this week. Emily, what did you love this week in League of Legends competitive?
So my love and hate go hand in hand. So I'll start with what I loved, and it was C9's draft against Team Liquid. I know a lot of people do not appreciate when we abuse support items to get more gold, especially in the bottom lane. It used to be an issue with people picking support items in other lanes. Now it's more specifically you try to do a duo lane like this where you're both rushing and you get to fulfill your support items before you have individual penalties. That is the idea behind the Lux Sona lane. I absolutely loved this composition, actually. I thought it was great. I thought it was, if not innovative, at least taking an available exploit and testing it out and seeing what you could do. I also think that it was kind of a smart idea to bring it out against TL because I feel like they're a strong enough team that they would be able to punish if C9 made a mistake, and C9 made a lot of mistakes in execution. I'll get to that later. But just generally, I really liked the comp. I like to see them experimenting with different things, and I don't think the reason why they lost was the fact that they locked in this composition.
So Emily had a chance to speak with Nisky, the mid laner for C9. Speaking of composition, she asked him that question, and here is what the Turkish mid laner had to say.
Lost to TL, but with a very interesting composition. So I want to start there. How much did you guys practice this going into this match?
I think we've had probably 3 to 4 games with it. And every game was kind of easy in our favor. But also that's kind of every scrim we play. So it's like, was it actually really good? Or was it like not that good, but we still won because we're just the better team in scrims? But I felt like it was fine. I think we played 4 times, so we're not like as comfy as like every other comp we played like thousands of times. So yeah, I think it's something new we're trying.
So a lot of the like post-game discussion has been around like whether you would try this out against a team like TL, who's also vying for first place, or IMT, who's obviously like more towards the mid bottom of the standings. Was it because you just like you really wanted to test this out against a better team to see how it could be exploited?
Not really. I think we just thought that it'd give us kind of the edge on like how we could actually like surprise TL and how we would play the game, because usually they don't like punish us in the early game, and with Sonalux that's kind of what teams try to do, right? They try to punish it. But yeah, like even today I feel like we played really well early. Like they made lots of mistakes. We capitalized on it, but then we made some really dumb plays in the mid game, which led them to kind of come back and then just go away with the game. So.
Well, maybe Nisky's a midfielder too. Play some soccer. Who knows? That full interview is available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ESPN Esports. We also have interviews there with Huhi of Golden Guardians, as well as Wonder from G2. We'll get to that a little bit later. Now let's turn the tables a full 180. Emily, what did you hate this week in competitive League of Legends?
So, I mean, hate's a strong word, but I strongly disliked the way that C9 ended up playing out this composition, especially against what TL walked in. I know that a lot of people were talking about this on Twitter. Like a lot of analysts were talking about this on Twitter, so I won't like repeat too much, but basically C9 could have kind of just stacked MR and and left Team Liquid completely in the dust. They also mis-executed more than a few times in terms of timing. Like, this is a very ultimate-based composition because you have Shen, Hecarim, Set, and then the Sona Lux that we talked about. So you're basically looking for like really big 5v5 fights where you're basically supporting Blabber to go in and just destroy people. And I know everyone's going to point out the insane Blitzcrank hook, like Core JJ basically like carried his team to victory. But even then you can see C9's like missteps there where Blabber decides to go in anyway. And I think he thinks that Licorice is going to support him with the ultimate, but Licorice doesn't come in. And it just seemed like they were not on the same page enough to be able to execute this composition as well as it could have been to win. Which is why that's why we play the game, So, but I think I really love this draft. I really think that C9 could have done a lot better in terms of execution. But to wrap everything up, I still appreciate that they tested it out and tried it. And I don't disagree with that decision whatsoever. I think that was actually really great to see from them because you have to try to keep yourself sharp and ahead when you are like C9 and you are like by default at the top of the standings. So I did really like this look from them. Execution was not great.
Yeah, they bullied the entire top side of the map, and like the biggest question in bot lane was the only thing that didn't get beat up so hard on, and which obviously allowed Tactical and Core JJ some room. What I was like asking myself when I saw them draft this is like, who did they scrim this against, right? Because like this feels like something that like someone would definitely leak, and I'm wondering if it did. Whereas like Blitzcrank is actually really smart to play against a comp like that, and I was kind of surprised. Like, I know Core can kind of play a little bit of everything, but I was a little surprised by the Blitzcrank pick. It definitely felt like something that they like anticipated. I don't know if that was like mid draft. They're like, oh yeah, let's go Blitz, or if they like knew something was coming. I'm really curious like who C9 actually ended up scrimmaging with, where they pulled a comp like this out in scrims earlier last week.
I don't know, but if I was picking into the C9 comp, I would not have picked such a magic. Damn it. Like they didn't itemize properly against it, but TL's composition from my perspective and from I think most people's perspective is that it's really easy to itemize against. I don't disagree with the Blitzcrank pick, but just generally like Ezreal, Syndra, Mordekaiser, like they're all really magic heavy champions that you can kind of just easily build MR and steamroll, especially if C9's comp gets going, which it did. So I think it came down to team fighting.
To be fair, though, like Shin is awful to build MR on of all the champions in this game, right? Like if you're
he didn't have to build the Frozen Heart. He didn't have to build the Frozen Heart.
That was pointless, but I will say like
I love Licorice, but he did not have to build the Frozen Heart.
The tank champs on C9 though, they don't itemize particularly well with MR. Hecarim does, obviously. Spirit Vis is just quite good on him, but nonetheless, Shin feels terrible to build MR against. So build MR on.
We're gonna talk about the LCS a lot more later on in the show, but let's move on to the meat and potatoes of what we're gonna talk about today. Tyler, I'm gonna start with you on this one. The theme of the show, as I mentioned at the top of the program, is what is going on in our Western leagues, in the LEC and the LCS. What is going on in the LEC right now? Why are we in this giant bowl of soup situation with all of these teams performing well one week, underperforming another week? We're getting surprise results. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. Tyler, why are we in this predicament?
I mean, I think it would be foolish and kind of silly not to mention that online play, as we will dive into, is a big reason why LEC might not so much be the LCS's main problem, but essentially for specifically the LEC, the game levels have gone down. The level of play, I would say, has dropped quite considerably. And also with, G2 and Fnatic, kind of the mom and dad of the LEC, right? When the mom and dad are home, like there's order in the house. You always have those two to look upon and be like, everything else in LEC can go down to a dumpster fire, but you can always look up to mom and dad and be like, we're going to be okay in the end. Like when it goes to Worlds, we'll always have G2 and Fnatic. This split, mom and dad are gone. They're on a bender somewhere in Las Vegas. Like they're nowhere to be seen, Arda. They are gone, and that means the kids are ruling the roost, which means you have Rogue and Mad Lions, and you look at these teams, and they are not the teams that, and they play such a sporadic style. And like 1 week, Rogue looks great. The next week, they look inconsistent and they throw games. Mad Lions, this team that a lot of people are saying, oh, they can be one of the best European teams of all time, are still showing growing pains because they are a young team. They are a very, very young team that's not going to be G2 because they don't have the experience and the necessary, international, reps that they do. They're still so young, except Humanoid, who has had those Worlds reps last year playing on the big stage in Madrid. But the rest of the players are still so young. So right now in the LEC, it's a thing of the two pillars of the league, Fnatic and G2, look mortal. They look out of sorts, which leaves us in this predicament where it's kind of a mess. And I do want to say that online play probably has a lot to do with it. I do think that has, LEC was rolling, and now it kind of feels like they've taken a step back. And I think that's also a big thing, right, where the LEC was being talked about as the best region in the world. Like LCS has been fourth. It's going to stay fourth. If they get a team to quarterfinals, it'd be very impressive. Where the Europe was like, we can do this. We made 2 World Finals. We won MSI. We are right up there with China. And then this split, it just looks like they're kind of lost. With mom and dad gone, LEC isn't as secure as it once was. So I would say online play is a big thing, and also the falterings of Fnatic and G2 has also made it a much more chaotic split for Europe.
So Emily, specifically as it pertains to online play, that's a very good point. But let's dive into that. Let's detail exactly what you have noticed since play went online that concerns you about LEC play. What have you been noticing?
I mean, I think the big thing for me with teams in the LEC, and this isn't like picking on any one team, to be honest, it's like across the board, that they're making a lot of small mistakes on the map that I didn't see some of these teams, especially the teams towards the top. So Tyler mentioned that, it makes a huge imbalance when G2 and Fnatic aren't doing well, because those are kind of the teams that have represented Europe every year at international events. And they are, in a sense, what's given Europe this kind of perceived strength internationally, right? Like especially G2, but also Fnatic. Fnatic's been around for forever. They've usually performed really well at international events. They made Worlds Finals 2 Worlds ago. And with a lot of these teams towards the top, even like the Mad Lions and Rogue, Rogue, who did a lane swap this week, which I actually didn't hate. I think they made a lot of mistakes in executing it, but I don't necessarily think the lane swap itself was terrible, but I know that's a very controversial opinion. I was happy to see it tested. I don't know why the Scion didn't die. I thought they were going to have it die. And then, yeah, anyway, I think like it comes down to a lot of really minor mistakes that I'm not used to seeing LEC teams do, especially around how they play around vision, how they trade for objectives, minion wave management, and matchups are something that, like, especially laning matchups, I always think of, when I think of the LEC, when I think of previously when it was called EU LCS, I always think of these laners who have a really good understanding of laning matchups, right? And so when they go into draft, they'll really, really focus. Like, I know the Lane Kingdom meme comes from LEC, but like I've always really appreciated that about LEC, whether it's a bot laner or solo laners. I feel like they have a really strong understanding of how to play specific laning matchups. And I've seen less of that this year. I've seen a lot more like mistakes when it comes to those minutia that, like, no offense, like I don't expect most North American teams to necessarily be able to do, but like I do expect it from especially like the top half of the LEC. And I see them making a lot of those minor mistakes with things that they had done in the past. And I don't know if it's an online thing, but I do think playing online really makes a huge difference because of a lot of reasons. And to be clear, a lot of this is presumption because I haven't talked to the LEC teams about this specifically, but talking to other players who are have spoken to me about playing online, like the challenges to it, a lot of it is like, even though they're together, right, in Berlin, in team houses. They like it's difficult to get in that mindset sometimes if you're not like getting up and going to the studio and it's game day and there's like a different atmosphere and attitude about being on stage as opposed to being online, where like you might just be heading in your gaming house to another room in the house, or you might still be traveling to the gaming house but still not like on a stage, right? So there's not that same kind of sense of urgency, I guess. I haven't seen anything like the ping issue like at MSC where we saw Tian like fudging his Kindred ults and they were really bad because the timing was off because of ping. Like I haven't seen anything like that. But I do think it is a lot more difficult to get in that mindset, and some teams are a lot more successful at it than others. And when we look at G2 and when we look at Fnatic, even before we expected them to do super well at like 2018 Worlds, for example, right? You saw these teams really flourish and come into their own on a stage. And I do think that's something that's missing. And I do think it's affected the LEC adversely.
Yeah, I think it's telling that the top two teams in the LEC are two of the youngest teams in the LEC in terms of age. I did something a while ago. Arda actually reached out to me about it a few weeks ago, or last week, I think. I did a piece in the offseason about ages in the LCS and the LEC, how long certain players have played, which legacy players have been there since the very beginning of the riotified Western League of Legends scene when they first started the LCS in 2013. And the LEC is incredibly young, and it only got younger after that piece was written because teams like Mad Lions, scrapped previously Splice, scrapped their roster and built what they've built. And Rogue too, right? Like Rogue is an incredibly young team, and it speaks to the depth of the European regional leagues. And I think that like the ERL, many of those are online also. They were online anyway, and that's why I think you see really high tier performances there. So this is comfortable for a lot of these players, for Rogue and Mad Lions, I think, because they've done this for a while, and they were stars in the ERLs already. So this is comfortable to them, and I don't want to take away from that, right? I'm sure we can dive into whether Mad Lions is a legitimate best team, one of the best teams in all of EULCS/LEC history. Like that's another discussion, but yeah, like these two teams are excelling, I think, in part because they're really comfortable. That stage factor is out the window for them. And meanwhile, like this is very uncomfortable, I think, to your point, Emily, for some of the people who have been in the scene for a while. And when I look at the middle of the pack teams, like there's just this massive inconsistency, right? Like week before last or weekend before last, we see like Origin with Jack Troll come out and just stomp everyone, right? Like somehow magically, like, and again, we talked about this last week. I think it's because more so because Upset's comfortable with Jack Troll more than he was Destiny, less because Jack Troll is skill-wise a better player. But yeah, like we see Origin like stomp people last week, and then this week they come out and lose both games. And the same can be said for teams like Fnatic. Fnatic's been on a really good streak the last 2 weeks. But guess what? 3 weeks ago, they lost to Schalke AO4. And it's just like every single one of them, like every single one of these middle-of-the-pack teams will look really good for a short burst of time, and then they'll get ran over. And it makes no sense to me. I don't think that this is the Soup League, and I don't know if we could chalk that all up because of online, but like something's up in the LEC generally, and a lot of these teams cannot keep it together for more than like 2 to 4 game stints. They'll do really good for 2 or 4 games in a row, and then like they'll just fall off the face of the mountain. And we've seen it the entire split, with the exception of the top half of Rogue and Mad Lions. But even then, Mad Lions is like losing to SK and stuff like that, and you're just like, what's going on here? Like this league is like very questionable right now.
So let's focus, Tyler, on the top half of the tables right now. A lot of people would have assumed that G2 would be in position there if you were to ask people several months ago. They are not there. Mad Lions are there, and already there seems to be this comparison happening, at least if you ask Peter Dunn, the head coach of Mad Lions. He is not happy with how his team is being perceived or talked about by some people online and by some members of the LEC and League of Legends communities. Essentially, as you can see from the tweet, comparing this split's Mad Lions to peak G2 in 2019. In particular, setting that expectation. I find this absolutely ridiculous. The fact that people would try to put some sort of expectation on this young core group of players as if they're going to be performing perfectly like we've seen in the past from other teams. I think this is ludicrous, Tyler.
Of course it is, but we're talking about esports here. And esports is always, and I've said this time and time again, and I think everyone can agree with this, is that a year in esports is like 5 years in traditional sports. Everything needs to be new. Everything needs to be fast. Everything needs to be the next great thing, right? Everything needs to be the best or the next. You need the next Faker. You need the next Caps. You need the next G2. And Mad Lions, a very exciting team, comes in. You have Kaiser. You have, you have Shadow. You have all these really interesting players, and they come up, and this is, it's like Griffin 2018. It's like Damwon 2019. Like, everyone loves a good rookie supernova story. And I'm one of them. I love writing about rookie supernova teams. It's fun to see players come out of nowhere to just kind of rise up and take over and, be the rebellion against the old establishment. I think the big difference here is, A, Mad Lions hasn't won anything. Even Griffin, for how, you could say the ending of Griffin was quite, dire. They made 3 straight LCK finals. They made it to a Worlds quarterfinals. Like, they had a proven track record before they had hype going in the spring split, but it wasn't, or the summer split where they debuted, but it wasn't really until they, made the final, and that's when really you could start talking about them as a legitimate, supernova team. For Mad Lions, comparing them to G2 is ridiculous. Peak G2, I think people are forgetting how dominant G2 was and how they could just play whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. It didn't matter about the regular season record. Really, when it came to the playoffs, they dominated. When it went to the MSI, I was there. I saw it in my own eyes. Team Liquid go into that final and get ripped shred to shred in that final. It's ridiculous, and it's too much pressure on this young team. And we're in an online era, too, where even the results from an online era don't really stack up compared to playing offline. We don't know how they will stack up in, a world championship or an international stage playing against Chinese or, Korean teams, even North American teams to an extent. Like, I feel bad for Mad Lions because it's a lot of pressure on this team. And I think it's a lot more to do so that G2 and Fnatic aren't playing up to the level they should be playing, less so than Mad Lions usurping the Kings, right? Where I do think if they win the LEC, it'll be an amazing accomplishment. But until they actually get to that final, to make it past the semifinals, and get to that final moment where they can actually win a best of 5 versus, maybe a rejuvenated G2, a rejuvenated Fnatic, maybe a Rogue who's finally finding itself in a consistent form, then we can start talking about these, accolades and start hyping them into the World Championship. But right now, it's like esports people, esports fans in general, and I've been there. I mean, I think we've all been there. We like hyping up new things because everything goes by so quickly that you always want to latch onto something new.
I mean, I think
words
it
have
does
not been said, Tyler. It's so
it
true.
does a huge disservice to Mad Lions as well, like, because they're really good at so many things. Like last week, I know I talked about how you can like track their progress as a team from like really early spring, like the first time they met G2 to now. And they are like, I think a legitimately like strong team fighting team that could get better if they actually like, boot camped and just scrimmed Chinese teams for a 14-day quarantine period before a Worlds bubble. So I think like the most frustrating thing about this narrative for me is that it takes away like a lot of things that Mad Lions are actually good at right now and how they're succeeding. And it takes away from their like marked improvement and how they've adjusted and grown together as a team. Because if you're just using them as like a G2 XP, you're basically saying like, oh, we put all these players together and they were amazing from the get-go and this team is like still the next like best thing, when I think
super team.
Not only is it a lot of pressure, but like that's taking away from like how all of these players have grown. Like people did not think Humanoid was anywhere near the best mid laner, like previously, like prior to this split. Like sure, Shadow, I know the big thing is that he was scouted by EDG, and like that is like the big thing is like, oh, was he going to play in the LPL? But like he himself has grown as a jungler while in the LEC. Like, I feel like you can point out all of these things about these players and how they've grown individually and as a team, and forcing them into a G2 narrative takes away from that. So that's what's frustrating for me.
Jacob, I have a question for you. You're really good with analyzing business decisions, translating them onto play, right? And we know that G2 have recently signed contracts, meaning they will be with the 5 core players will remain on the G2 roster until November 2022, right? This decision, and I asked Wonder about this in an interview that you can find on our YouTube channel, and he seemed to intimate, because I know Tyler mentioned, anything can happen, maybe there'll be a trade. They are fully, regardless of what happens in terms of results, their full intention is to stay as a team. Even if they come in last place in the split, they don't have any intentions on making any changes. That's what they're saying. So, like, anything can happen, of course, but that's what they're saying. We're running it back no matter what. This is the team we want to run with. We feel confident. We feel like we're the best team, definitely in the LEC. We're competitive in the world, whatever. My question, though, is there's a difference between playing on a contract year and playing once you've gotten that bag, right? So what I'm wondering is how much motivation do the G2 players have right now? They got their contract. They have an inherent complacency that could set in for many players in that situation. They're signed, they're sealed, they're delivered. They already know that they're great as a team. They've already gotten assurances from their superiors that things won't change regardless of any sort of results in the LEC this split. Does that have anything to do with their placement right now in the LEC, Jacob?
I don't think so. And I also think that the notions that I'll believe those assurances when I see them from both sides. That players won't get frustrated enough to want to split up if things continue to go terribly wrong for an extended period of time, or that management won't make any changes. Because let me tell you something. There's a lot of teams in esports right now that are financially struggling in the middle of the pandemic. Let me tell you which one of those is not. G2 Esports. That team has enough money that if they wanted to buy somebody out of a large contract and say, see you later, we're going to go find someone else, they could. And so, everything's happy and rosy when you're a world's finalist and you make second place at the League of Legends World Championship. And look, I think that, I don't think that there's a complacency for G2 either, in the sense that, those players probably feel really bad about coming second at Worlds, and they're motivated to try to go back and make a run for the Worlds title again, right, this year. I think that their chances were better to win it last year than they are now, personally. I think that they look really rough right now in this online environment, and now they're now we're even questioning if they'll make it to Worlds, rather than whether if they'll win it. So for me, I don't believe that. So I'll break this down. I believe Wonder in this current moment. I do not believe that is true long term if things continue to go terribly. That's what I'll say. I believe when he says that to you.
Fair enough.
When he says that to you, he means it. I believe that will change I believe that could change if things go terribly wrong for an extended period of time. All that to say, I think that their problems are multifold, right? At the beginning of the season, they didn't really scrimmage very much beforehand because of things going on. Obviously, Perk's dad passed away.
Sure,
they
of course.
break from that, and now he's back, and they just had a lot of other circumstances around them. We've seen this with other teams too. They are not alone in this regard. Team Liquid is a great example of this in the spring split, right? They didn't have Broxa for 3/4 of the split, and it was terrible. It really bogged down everybody in the team. So it may be Perk's personal life and personal pain, but I'm sure it's being felt across the team. And I'm not putting any blame on him. I'm just saying when you're in that close quarters with someone and they're going through a rough time mentally, it rubs off on you to a certain extent, right? And so I think this team's issues are bigger than just complacency. I do think they have a little bit of complacency because they still think they're better than everyone else, and they're not. And so they kind of need to shrug that off and really put pavement at the metal and start taking things seriously. I've heard that they haven't taken all scrims as seriously as they may have should have. So to me, They need to get that funk off of them, but I wouldn't put like their contract security as the reason that they aren't taking this split as well as they should.
So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I wouldn't call it complacency, but there's like a very relaxed attitude that G2 has kind of always had. And I think that some of their issues might have been like, it's not like just stuff that's happening in the split, and it has nothing to do with being complacent in terms of like monetary reasons, but maybe, some of those things that have always happened when they're winning can't now slide when they're losing. I do think this is a really highly motivated team, and I don't think they see last year, to be quite honest, like from talking to them, I don't think they see last year as a success because they didn't win Worlds.
I have a question. To you guys, the table, you three, what's the minimum Europe has to do at Worlds where that is a success, or they are still where the fans will be happy? What's the barometer of success, the minimum of success where Reddit doesn't trash the LEC? What do they have to do?
Let me start with this one really quick. The problem is that the finals appearance last year has already set a precedent.
Yeah.
I think that there will be
another finals.
Yeah, there will be at least a large minority section of European fans that will be massively disappointed if there is not another finals appearance by an LEC team.
That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure for Europe.
2018,
it is. You're right.
2018 you had Fnatic. Last year you had G2. Like, they need to make another finals, I think. In order for people to say, like, whether it's fair or not, like whether I agree with how it reflects on the region as a whole, I think generally the community will be remarkably harsh if they don't make a finals, if a European team does not make finals.
And both of those teams, Fnatic and G2, got swept. Maybe even a win is necessary. One win, a 3-1.
Well, I think at the very least, if they're making a finals, they're maintaining a standard that has been set over the past 2 years, right?
But would it be embarrassing to lose 3 straight finals in a row? Oh,
especially if it's another sweep.
Yeah, as a North American
sweeps in a row. Woo.
Woo, as a North American writer, I could never even imagine that.
No, you can't imagine any sweeps in any finals of any international competition. Never.
Nope, never.
Not being surrounded by media all around the world.
Oh,
no.
Oh, no.
I mean, that's
in Taiwan on my mind.
That's because the North American team hasn't made a final in quite some time. But nonetheless, I don't see a world, and I know there's 4 spots, and G2 probably will qualify for Worlds because there are 4 spots for the LEC, and they're going to be a better playoff team than I think some of the others are in the middle of the pack right now. But if I'm hedging my bets right now, I think that the World Finals is 2 LPL teams and not an LEC team. Just based off raw performance. Maybe an LPL and LCK team.
If it is, that will be hilarious because LPL versus LPL international events is always funny.
If I had a bet, like right now, if I was in Vegas, if I was a betting man, Arda, if I was a betting man, Emily, I right now I'd say LPL versus LPL final is the most logical final, especially if the Shanghai bubble does come to roost and, the teams can practice in their team houses and it's a very comfortable setting. I could see a world where it's an IG versus top esports final. That would be an amazing final, by the way. That would be one of the best finals we could ask for.
That would be a banger.
Oh, that would be so many viewership records. I'm sure Riot, Tencent doesn't care about your. They're probably if they hear about this podcast, they're like, oh, Western League of Legends, who cares about that? They want the Chinese versus China final. That's where the real money is, to have the top versus IG final. I don't really care if it's another European team or not going to bring up NA making the final, but I do. If I was a betting man, I would put China versus China as the final right now, as we're creeping ever closer to the Worlds.
One last thing I do want to bring up regarding G2 and Fnatic, because I think a lot of North American fans forget, because they are not counting Spring as a championship point getter. The LEC did not do the same. So It is worth noting that despite the fact that summer means a lot more in terms of championship points, currently right now, G2 have 90 points and Fnatic have 70. So at the very least, if G2 don't make playoffs, I do think it'll be incredibly stunning. Like it'll actually be like a remarkable thing that we did not expect to happen. However, they're not out of the world's race, I would say, because they do have those 90 points from spring.
So the last thing we were going to do here in our LEC portion of what is going on in the LEC was we were going to talk about the middle of the pack, which is a sizable portion of the standings. Of course, we have Mad Lions and Rogue, who are both 10-3. They've been battling for top spot all split long. Then you have Schalke in the basement, slowly crawling out of it, though, with some impressive victories, including against G2 this past weekend. Then, from 3 to 9, you have this jumbled up cauldron of a soup that includes Fnatic, SK, G2, Origin, Excel, Misfits, and Vitality, all battling and jockeying for position, and they all have 2 wins separating the entire field. So what I thought might be fun to try is to associate a soup with each team in the soup.
All right.
The first question I have for my esteemed panelists, though, and I should have asked this during our production meeting, is would you like me to throw out a name and leave it open for you to answer, or would you like to be assigned a team?
Assign us a team. Spontaneous interaction, Arda. Give us some spontaneous interaction.
Okay. Starting with Tyler,
All right.
Fnatic. What kind of soup are they?
Oh, man. What kind of super Fnatic? That's actually really tough.
They were
What's like-
they're delicious soup from
I
back
know-
in the
I
day
know-
that's
I
gotten a lot
I know
worse.
what soup I would say.
I know what soup I would say. I had Fnatic on lock in my brain.
All right, give Emily Fnatic.
Emily, what soup would Fnatic be?
So I feel like people are going to disagree with this, but I'm going French onion because it's a classic, right? Like it's a soup that everyone knows of. It's not like, I feel like it's not particularly divisive either. Like you'll have people yelling about like borscht or clam chowder or whatever, but like French onion, yeah, like sure, people might not like it, but it's not like an incredible hatred of it, right? The reason why I picked French onion is because it's a classic. I feel like we always expect it to be there. We always expect it to appear on our menu, regardless of whether someone messes it up and it doesn't taste particularly good, and maybe it fluctuates from restaurant to restaurant, aka from meta to meta, as Fnatic tries to find something that they can kind of latch on and be comfortable with. Because if we look at patterns with Fnatic, they really like to latch on to specific picks and compositions and kind of let that carry them through a split. And they haven't found that this year, right? So it's not the greatest French onion soup, but it is a classic, and Fnatic are a classic, and they're always here. We always expect them to be here. I still expect them to, make playoffs, regardless of whether they make the LEC finals this summer. And I do expect them to qualify and represent the LEC at Worlds. So they're still always going to be there. They are a classic. They might not always light the world on fire, but sometimes you really get a great French onion soup, and it's a great moment.
Wow.
Like when they made the finals in 2008.
That was so much more in depth than I was actually.
For a long time.
I told you, I was like, I
love
have
it.
Fnatic on lock. I can
This
guess
is
it.
exact. Emily wins the segment already. This is exactly what I was hoping for, people. It's like Fnatic is French onion soup is on the menu in the restaurant this split, but everyone's telling you not to try the French onion soup because it's a new chef, and the chef is like butchering the French onion soup this split. It's awful. Usually the French onion soup is delicious, except for this week or this month. Jacob, Origin. Come on, this is an easy one. This is so easy.
Oh, I got it. It may not be what you want, but I got it. Origin is taco soup, and that is because wait. Let me explain. Taco soup varies depending on what household you're in, and it varies on the level of amount of pepper or blandness you put in it too. So you can make taco soup chock full of spices and peppers, and it is really good. That can be Origin at their top. They're still a little spicy. They got Upset, who's in the bot lane, who does some crazy stuff and pops off. He's this big star 80 carry. But sometimes you're in a household where taco soup is bland as hell. They only use salt. They don't use any peppers. They very much limited their spices. Maybe they make it without beans. You know, like it's really bland. That can also be Origin. So my point is that taco soup can be very up or very down. There's a huge array of how good taco soup can be. And that's Origin. They're the most inconsistent team in the LEC. They are so good when they're good and so bad when they're bad. And there's no in between. And that is taco soup in a damn nutshell.
I have a
I did
question
not know you
for
could make tacos into
Yeah,
soup,
I have my first question to you, Jacob, is what the heck is taco soup?
So it's like ground beef.
I thought you were describing chili.
No, it's like ground beef. It's beans. Sometimes you could add like a tortilla chip in there too, like a tortilla soup. You add various different cheeses, sour cream's a topping in it. Sour cream and cheese. It's very similar to chili, but it's more peppers than chili is.
Oh,
So
you add more peppers.
also it's not the same type of beans. It's usually black beans in taco soup, not pinto beans, which is in chili. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you for the explanation.
I was gonna say
Look it up.
it still sounds like chili to me, but you know, I'll digress. Okay. Tyler, G2.
G2. Are they? They're soup. Gee, I guess they are.
They are definitely in.
Man, I was hoping for one of the bottom teams. I had so many good ones for the bottom teams, but you're giving me G2. I feel like they're classes. So it's like chicken noodles. I want to say chicken noodle soup, but chicken noodle soup it's always right? Like G2 seems kind of off right now. Man, my soup metaphor.
Yeah, someone said G2 is cereal in the chat.
They've left the soup. They've left the soup behind. They're like
just
soggy
like, no,
cereal.
Yeah.
Arda, do you have one for G2?
No,
you are the soup master.
For G2, so they were the greatest soup of all time, so clearly Italian wedding. And this split, however, they have really G2 is a nice Italian wedding soup that suddenly the quality of the pasta in the soup has gone down significantly, and the meatballs in the Italian wedding soup
you're not getting
suddenly
the good meatballs.
Yeah, the meatballs are all like soggy and they feel expired.
It's like the first.
It's the worst Italian wedding soup is an S tier soup. We all know this. This is not up for debate.
Soup.
The greatest soup of all time, quite possibly, God tier soup. But if you make it poorly, it's one of those soups that you have to make exactly right. Otherwise, it's going to taste poorly. A little bit too much salt, maybe some paprika, a little bit excessive there. You have to make it right. Everything has to align perfectly. And for G2, they have not made that Italian wedding soup well. So that's my pick for G2.
My thought about that is it's like they used to be grandma's recipe for the Italian wedding soup. They are now like passed down 3 generations, and they look a lot worse. They taste a little bit worse. Some of those ingredients fell off the list along the way, so you missed out a few spices, and now here's your Italian wedding soup G2 3 generations later.
And then grandma's going to throw the slipper at you because you made the soup wrong and everything is just unraveling here. Yeah, it's just a big mess. Carlos is going to get mad at us, by the way, that we didn't pick something that was more
Spanish.
Yeah, more Spanish as opposed to Italian. He's like, what are you doing? Emily, how about Misfits? Let's do a couple more.
Oh, God. Okay. I didn't prep for Misfits. Let's see. Misfits are another one where it's like... See, Misfits are like, I feel like they're another, so we're going to do all the same soups. Because like the problem I have with a lot of these teams is I don't see like a clear-cut team identity, at least with like when I talked about Fnatic, right? Like they're struggling to find one, but you can see those growing pains because you see how they've played over the past like few years, right? In terms of how they target stuff. Misfits are just kind of like, I don't know, like
You can also pick a team that you have one for, because I loved the Fnatic one. The Fnatic one was perfect. You already won, so if you got another one, please.
Yeah. I mean, who else is in here?
Vitality.
Excel is an interesting one. Like, I would put Excel at like a, I don't know. Like, I would like pick another classic with a lot of variables, because I actually think that Excel, like Jacob has talked about this because he was like super on the Excel bandwagon, like when they announced their lineup for this split. And I think generally, I actually think they're not nearly as bad as people think they are in terms of how they perform. Like, they've made execution mistakes, but I think they're still like actually a really solid team. So maybe I'll go like a clam chowder that's improving, because we're like learning to make it a little bit better. Like, you were given a lot of like good fresh ingredients, like fresh clams, and you kind of messed it up a little bit here and there. Like, you didn't get the ratio right, and it was a little runny. And then one time you like over thickened it, and that was really gross. But now you're kind of starting to figure it out, and there's still like really good base ingredients in there. That's Excel to me. I actually really like Excel. Is like a very interesting team to me, actually.
Some was it Shirius A, who joins us in trivia all the time, said Misfits is like a salad. So we're going away from the soup a little bit. I like that, though. I actually
choose
thought,
the bowl of cereal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're going away from it.
Cereal and Misfits is a salad.
I would say that another team that's like a salad is Schalke. Schalke was a salad without any dressing whatsoever, and then the last week they just doused a bunch of ranch on it, and now it tastes great.
Well, they have some bad lettuce on the bottom layer, but it's being over poured with the dressing. That's a little bit better than the bad lettuce at the bottom. That's Schalke to me. Yes,
that's Schalke right now. That's right. Tyler, do you have any soups for us for any team? Any team at all?
Let's go SK Gaming. I'll do SK.
Okay,
SK Gaming, cheap.
The last one here.
Cheap, surprising. It's not what you expect, but it's cheap and it hits the spot when you need it. I'm going to top ramen. SK Gaming is the top ramen soup of the LEC, where no one's ever like, I gotta have the top ramen. It's never on, right in the front of everything. But when you need it, it's there, and it gets the job done. And that's just like SK Gaming. Not the most highly priced soup, not the one with the most fancy around it, but it hits the spot, it gets the job done, and that's what they've been doing this split. They're 7-6. They're on the verge of confirming the playoffs with a team that flipped around their solo laners. Crown Shot is an MVP candidate, and they look great. Just like Top Ramen, overlooked, cheap, but it's always going to be there for you. And I think SK can be that team from, they're always around. SK is always around. From since the beginning of League of Legends lore with Ocelot. I don't know where that Ocelot guy went with all the scarves. Don't know where he is now. Hope he's doing well. But SK Gaming has just been a through line since. Sometimes it go away. Sometimes you don't always have top ramen around. But when it does, when you do see that top ramen and you have nothing else in the house, it does the job.
And you put a little, maybe you get a little fancy. You make a soft boiled egg and put it in there. A little bit of sesame oil and soy sauce. So there you go. You got yourself some enhanced
sriracha in there.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of nori. You make your top ramen a little bit better.
So there's a good foundation.
A lot. Yeah, I like
it's a good cheap foundation that can be built upon in future seasons.
I promise you all, the next time we do this, we're going to have graphics with, like, the logos on soup cans and everything. It's going to be great. You're watching the Rift Rewind, the League of Legends weekly program here on ESPN Esports. Don't forget, immediately following this, we have our trivia. Join us on Twitch no matter where you're watching us. If you're listening to us in podcast form, you can join us, usually around somewhere between 7:30 and 8 Eastern. Whenever Rift Rewind ends, we get to trivia night. You can join us on Twitch, play along, and it's a lot of fun. Let's get to our final topic on Rift Rewind this week, and that is what is going on in the LCS. What are we seeing with these teams right now? Cloud9 keeps losing, like you mentioned, Emily, making some changes, trying some things, not working out for them necessarily in execution. And then you got Team Liquid. All of a sudden, they're keeping up with C9. They are statistically looking like, in some ways, a superior team, or at least top of the tables in some of their execution and some of their play. But are those numbers, Emily, deceiving, particularly as it pertains to Team Liquid being a top team in the LCS?
Yeah, so I really like this Team Liquid team. I feel like I always have to preface whenever I'm going to criticize a team with like, I actually do really think this team can be legitimately good, but I don't think they're legitimately good right now. And there are a few reasons for that. One, I think prior to the season starting, I talked to Broxa about how they really wanted to be like a more proactive team early. And I feel like we have not seen that. And one of the things that I was really looking forward to going into the split was to see if the Jensen like Broxa synergy would come to fruition, because that was, I think, one of the things that people were really hoping for from this team is to have Jensen find a jungler that he actually looks like really strong with. Because even on previous teams when he was performing really well, I feel like we've never seen him find that jungler that he just syncs with like really, really, really well. And so while I actually think he's still playing well individually, I think that they're not making the most of, I guess, what could come out of like a really strong mid jungle synergy. And we're just not seeing that. Like there are games where Broxa just looks really disconnected from a lot of his lanes. And they have like, so some of their numbers are really, really good because they're winning, right? But then if you look at some of their other numbers, like for example, their first blood rate, and not that first blood is always everything, because you can be proactive and still be syncing with your lanes as a jungler without necessarily getting kills, right? Like we saw, I think Contracts with 100T when they beat C9 was a really good example of this on Olaf. Like he wasn't necessarily going in and murdering everyone in lanes early. He was garnering advantages. He was counter jungling. You know, he was doing a lot to accrue advantages, and he was still paying attention to his lanes, but it wasn't like a very visible like kill thing. But I do think, you know, the low first blood rate, they have a fairly low dragon control when you compare them to a top team like C9, or even a team that I do think has a legitimately strong early game, which is Golden Guardians, actually, where they have like a 61%. Cloud9 is a 72%. Obviously, it's going to be inflated because they've won so much. But, you know, Team Liquid have won just as many games now, and they have a 44% dragon control rate. So, like, they're small like cracks, and I think a lot of Team Liquid's wins have definitely come from either a misexecution from their opponents, like for example Core JJ's blitz hook capitalizing on the fact that C9 are you know kind of misplaying their composition a bit, right? And then Blabber goes in, and then Team Liquid is able to go from there. Like I do think they have the intelligence to punish opponents' mistakes, which is why they are so high in the standings right now. But I want to see more from this TL team because I feel like they have the talent to be better. And I want to see them perform even better because I do think right now their win rate is not necessarily indicative of how well they've been playing. And they've had a lot of really close wins that have come from kind of a flip in the mid to late game that TL have capitalized on.
I agree. It's actually, I was going to get into my broader point as we're going to get into next about my thoughts on the LCS that's split. But the thing is, Team Liquid's record looks great, and I do think they have a higher gear, but they're not forced to show it. It's very similar to Cloud9, right? Where these teams, I feel, I'm not saying they're looking towards Worlds. I'm not saying that they're prepping for Worlds because I'm sure Team Liquid just wants to make it to the playoffs and make it to a final with their new team if possible. But it's complacency where it's like, you don't have to be at an 8 out of 10 to win games in the LCS. You can play, Team Liquid has enough talent to play at a 5 out of 10 level, play the scaling comp till 35 minutes, and win games off of that, just not playing stupid. It's the reason why Immortals did so well last split. They were mechanically, one of the bottom teams in the table, and eventually they get figured out, but they won a lot of their games last split because they just weren't dumb. And that's kind of a requirement in some games for the LCS. But a lot of times it just comes down to which team is less stupid in that game. Who makes the least amount of mistakes? And for Team Liquid, they aren't making a ton of mistakes. They're not being very proactive. But in a league where there's so many teams that are just giving away games, there's so many games in split where Dignitas and CLG have literally done nothing and just kind of let the game just slip away. And it's like, all right, you take that dragon, you take that dragon. Oh, you want to take a Baron? Go take a Baron. We're just gonna lean back into our nexus until you finally beat us. Like, in the LCS, a lot of times it's who can make the least amount of mistakes. And for a team like C9 and Team Liquid, especially C9, who are just trying things out, they are very confident that they will make it to the World Championship just because of the level of LCS right now. There's not a lot of a hunger or a push to really try anything new when the old things are working. For Team Liquid, if scaling to 35 minutes, getting, tactical on a 6-item Ezreal or a 6-item Aphelios and just playing standard works, they're not going to change anything because the LCS teams aren't really pushing them to change or be better than what they are. And that's kind of the sadness of LCS is that we're not getting pushed. There's no real. It's bland. It's so bland. And as someone who's covered the LCS on the ground for 5 straight years, this is one of we'll get into it in a little bit, but it's such a not fun season watch. This is probably the least amount of fun I've ever had watching the LCS.
Okay, let's get into it right now. A couple of comments in the chat before we get to asking the elephant in the room question here. Ponza had a great point. If LCS was a soup, it's cream of mushroom.
That's actually what I was about to ask. I was like, Tyler, what soup is the LCS?
He says cream of mushroom for improvement. I appreciate the dad joke. But yes, that's his choice
really
there.
Appreciate that.
So it's almost as if chat was reading Tyler in terms of where you were going, because here's a comment from Andrew Franklin 24, and then let's get into exactly how you feel about this particular statement. Quote, LCS is really expletive boring this year. I've watched every LCS season and have played for so long. This year has been the worst year for League IMO.
He's not wrong, and I tweeted out this week where I watch all the games. I have to. It's my job. I watch them. I do these interviews. I like the players. I like everyone involved. I like the production. I like the casters. I think the casting, even though they can get dunked on a lot by Reddit and social media, I do think the casting in North America is quite good, and I think the personalities like Mark Z and Probably are smart, and they actually do provide good analysis. But God, LCS is so it just feels like we're watching a rerun of a rerun, not even a good rerun. It seems like we're going home and watching a good rerun of Dexter's Laboratory. We're watching a rerun of a boring show that no one cared about 2 years ago. And it feels like we're just on the same track that we were on last year, where LCS went to the Worlds and no team made past the group stages. And it starts from the production down, right? Where the production is very stale. It wants to be that Sports Center. I mean, we're ESPN. We know how to do a professional, TV-like quality for MLB and NFL and all that. And it isn't fitting right with the fans. And LEC was in a very similar situation. Well, the European LCS a few years ago, and they rebranded. And I like some of the stuff they do in terms of production, but just from the top down, it just feels like we're watching the same stuff over and over and over again. And especially when you have teams like FlyQuest and Team Liquid, who this is not their fault at all. Take wins where you can get them, make it to playoffs, make it to Worlds, but they're playing the same old, which just, slowly ramp up. We'll get to 6 items. We'll play around Baron. We'll hope, some team throws around Baron. Oh man, Aphelios, let's roll our faces against the keyboard and just win the game. And it just, there's just nothing exciting. The most exciting thing about LCS was Cloud9, right? That was the huge narrative. Oh man, Cloud9, the greatest team of all time. I talked about that so much in the spring because that's the only thing I could hang my hat on is oh man, this team is historically good. Even that now is tarnished. I'm not saying Cloud9 isn't arguably one of the greatest LCS teams of all time, but they're not getting pushed enough to really show. They can screw around and pick as many, fun comps as they want because they know confidently that when push comes to sub, they're going to make it to Worlds. They're probably going to finish number 1 in the split. It just feels like we're in such a boring and bland space with the LCS, and there's nothing really exciting. The only thing really exciting is that, we have some few good rookies. Tactical, Whom, contracts coming back is pretty fun. But overall, if I was selling this to, a new fan, a new fan's I really like League of Legends. I watched Worlds for the first time last year. What league should I watch? I'm I'm not going to... LCS probably in top 5. They're probably not in top 5 on this. I would suggest the freaking Turkish league before the LCS at this point. I really like the excitement level for me when it comes to LCS. And I think it also has to do with the online play. I'm usually on the ground interviewing these guys, watching from arena. I think the online play plus the complacency, and the lack of play where it does feel like some of these teams just give away wins, whereas they don't even try, where they just will just give everything up. And probably one of the only like good points of the season for me has been Freak's casting, where Freak just keeps dunking on every team that just gives away free wins, and he's really kind of his casting this split has been really fun to listen to. But outside of that, like, it's just bland. LCS has just become really bland, and they do some good animations and some good production stuff, and I do like their teases that from time to time, but it just seems to feel like the same old. Like, how many times can we package C9 versus TSM, right? How many times can we repackage, oh, it's CLG versus TSM, this rivalry has sucked for 5 years, maybe this time it will become real again. It never does. It's the same storylines over and over and over and over again. It's become so bland, and it's so sad. Maybe if Cloud9 goes to Worlds, maybe if Team Liquid goes to Worlds, and they can make quarterfinals, make a semifinals run, it'll rejuvenate the space, but it's just so bland. And I know it's online play and everything, but I'm just so disinterested, and it sucks because I do love North America. Like, I want these North American teams to win. I want them to go to Worlds. I want a North American team to lift the Summoners Cup like Ember prophesied so many years ago. But right now, even me, someone who can make up the most optimistic analogies and predictions of all time, I'm just in a sad state, Art. I'm in a sad state, Emily. I'm in a sad state, Jacob. I'm just going to cover the TCL. The LCS is
I'll
bland.
be your translator, Tyler. We can go together. I'll be your translator, man.
We have a built-in Turkish translator.
Yeah, I got you.
So I want to say this, right? So, like, props to Riot for changing the overlays and the production this split. It is better than it was last. In terms of design, not in terms of function. So, like, the LCS broadcast to me screams, we are professionals and we want to be sports, but they don't understand their audience. Like, the whole, like, dome thing that they do to, like, make the, like, overlay a little bit more interesting for the analysts, like, yeah, that's cool. Like, that animation, whoever built that in Cinema 4Z or Cinema 4D, like, great job, right? Like, it's effective, but, like, and it's clean, but it's not necessarily interesting. The one other thing, and it's good we have B-roll on the screen right now, I hate the top bar with the statistics. It's awful. The kills are, like, so unnoticeable in particular, and, like, I know kills are not a relevant stat in terms of, like, high tier analysis, right? But, like, to a fan, to a basic fan, kills actually matter a lot, and they're not very noticeable at all right now. Like, you see them next to the sword, but, like, they're not like, they don't stick out to you like they used to. And so, like, yeah, like, it looks clean, it looks better, but functionally it is not better. And, like, meanwhile, the LEC is, like, all over the place, and I, like, loved everything they did around Pride this past weekend. The fact that, like, they had all the various different, like, all the sets were changed around to be, like, Pride flag themed, colored. Like, that was awesome. Like, I like the fact that, like, the LEC takes these, like, creative swings. It's been one of my, like, favorite things about 2019 and 2020 in League. But, like, yeah, the LCS, like, it's cleaner, it's more 2020 style, but it's, like, actually, like, the assets themselves are actually really boring and awful.
So I will say, regarding the dome is much more appealing to sponsors, and also, like, the Emmy Award nomination committee than the actual hardcore League of Legends fan, right?
I also think that, so, like, I have a few gameplay reasons why LCS is boring. But for the broadcast, like, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, Jacob, but I also think that one thing that does have to be brought up is that because of the current state of COVID-19 in the US, they are given the least amount of leeway of all broadcast teams right now. LCK and LPL are both played in studio with players without audiences. And then LEC has the, outside of, the one scare they had where they did bring everything back and did it from everyone's homes, they have been holding most of the actual production at the studio itself, although teams are still in their gaming houses. So I think that's one thing that does have to be brought up when criticizing the LCS broadcast. I don't actually disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I do think that's a necessary point of context. For play style, I think Tyler touched upon one of the things that has bothered me about North America for so long. And I actually ask a lot of Korean and European players, and they can never give me an actual answer as to why NA teams play so passively. And their default is always to play incredibly passively and wait for their opponents to make mistakes. It's a very like traditional quote unquote style of play. It's also a very boring one to watch, especially if, and no offense, like North American players, because I think these players could go boot camp on a better server than North America and still have the mechanical skill to go up against anyone in the world. But the problem is that they're stuck on any server. So you still don't have like the dazzling mechanical displays that you will get from even teams that play passively in like LCK, for example. We've brought up this as a problem that LCK teams have as well. I think that one of the things that North American teams have always struggled with is having an identity outside of that, which is actually why, like, yes, C9 are experimenting, but one of the reasons I liked their composition is because it was interesting, right? Like, that's still a composition where it's like a press R, we're all going in, it's going to be this bombastic 5v5, it's going to look really great. It's relying on the mechanical skill that we know our players have. And I really liked it, despite the fact that they misexecuted it, right? Like, I want them to keep doing stuff like that because they can. And it's the only way that they're going to be able to continue to improve in a region that, to Tyler's point, is not pushing them very, very much, right? And I think, like, when you see even, like, lower tier LPL teams, for example, since LPL is the region that I watch the most games of by virtue of the fact there are 17 teams, you have these like weird play styles that develop where you have teams just trying to test their own mechanical prowess in 1v1s and 2v2s across the map. And we don't see teams taking those chances in NA. And we hear about them taking those chances in scrims, but we don't see that ever translate to actual LCS play. So that's something I want to bring up in terms of why North America continues to be boring. I think that is another reason.
This reminds me of, to imagine a boxing fight where both fighters are counter punchers.
Yeah.
So they're waiting for their opponent to throw the first punch, and they're circling around each other, and they're waiting, and they're bobbing and weaving, and maybe they throw out a jab as a feat, but they're really waiting to commit until their opponent makes a mistake, but the opponent doesn't make a mistake because they are doing the exact same thing. And so they end up circling around for 12 rounds, and it goes to a boring decision for whoever threw the most jabs.
And they're not even world class. They're not even world class at that, right? Like, South Korea played like that forever, but it was fine because they were the best. And it was fine watching because when Samsung White did it, it was masterful. It was beautiful. You were watching them constrict teams like a boa constrictor and just choke them out. When it's like NA, it's like you're watching a garden snake try and choke teams out, and they just get stepped on. And the two biggest things for me with NA is, number one, I do agree with the whole they're not in studio thing. But the best mind for NA content, for LCS content, they had her on the team. Oliver May can make magic happen with her and Broden, Broden Plett, one of the best video producers in esports, those two literally just go off and make content by themselves with $20 worth of items and do so many great things and get so many more views and do LEC quality videos for pretty much nothing. And they had her on the broadcast, and this is nothing against Tigers versus Ovlin. I think Tigers is a great host, and I think that as time goes on, she's going to get more comfortable in the role, and she's amazing in her job. But when it comes to creative minds, they had Ovlin May, one of the best in all of esports, I would say, who can create, magic out of dirt, literal dirt. She can make it into something fun, and they had her on the staff, and she still does stuff, freelance for them. But they had such a great mind, and they just, she's not on the team anymore. She's not there, and she's someone who I think it was in those boardroom meetings, leading the production staff, you would see a more fun, rejuvenated LCS. So obviously, man, again, like, it shows that you don't need a huge production staff. You don't need the studios to make some really great content. And secondly, it's also, when I talk about players in North America about, like, why can't you, why is NA so bad? Why are you guys so passive? It comes down to solo queue, where how the hell has Riot not put a server or something in Los Angeles so these players can play on good ping? Look at Valorant. They have enough games. There's 20 freaking servers in North America. There's an LA server for Valorant. So when I'm talking to these players, I'm like, You play Valorant, and they're like, oh yeah, it's awesome. Like I can play on like 10 ping. I feel like I'm moving like so well. And then you go to League of Legends where they're playing on 50 ping, and it's like, why isn't there a Los Angeles server? It's a multi-billion-dollar company. Come on, I know there's probably semantics and everything why they can't have like 2 servers. There's not enough player base, obviously. But come on, like they need something in LA for these players to play on, because playing on 50 ping isn't going to cut it when it comes to the World Championships, where every single World, I remember, every single NA player is like, oh man, this is so awesome playing on good ping for once. And I agree with Emily, where Blabber mechanically, I don't think Blabber is below any player mechanically in the world. I think he can stand up with pretty much anyone when it comes to pure mechanics. But when you're on a slog of a server and you're playing on 50 ping all the time in solo queue, and solo queue games take an hour to pop, and when they pop finally, people dodge all the time, it just doesn't create a good training environment. And until the solo queue is fixed, until there's a server in LA where these players can actually play on ping where it doesn't feel like they're trudging through mud, North America is not going to get better. And these players say it over and over and over. And they tell Riot, hey, we need better servers. We need a server in Los Angeles to actually play on good ping. And we're going to still be on Chicago, which is way over there. And for these players, it's just so silly. Come on, Riot, you can have more than one server in America. Come on. I know the player base isn't as big as you would hope, but when Valorant has 20 freaking North American servers where you can play in Texas, New York, LA, Seattle, San Francisco, come on. Get another server in America so these players can actually play on good ping for once.
Big agree.
Multi-billion-dollar company. This isn't, we're not talking about like a startup here. We're talking about a company that makes a lot of money. A lot of money. And I think it's like when you have another game that's doing well in Valorant, where you have, when the whole thing's like, oh, we're going to make it great for the players. We have servers everywhere. You can do the same for League. We don't need 20 servers in North American League, but you can have one in LA.
What is that game that you and I cover, Emily, that has server problems?
Oh,
what is that
you're
called?
Talking Call of Duty?
Oh, that's the one. Yes, the Call of Duty
Right, well,
League
at
and
least-
their servers.
At least we're not that bad.
Yeah.
That would be even.
I mean,
yeah.
I think the big thing is that like previously, I don't know if this is true, but previously Riot has said that they don't want like one server to become the good server. Honestly, who cares?
Who cares?
That's what's like in China. They have 33 servers and one is the good server.
Yeah.
And that's actually the one that you need to basically qualify on to be an LPL pro. You need to be at a certain level on that server. And like no one, like you are professional players, like you're in competition. It does not matter if you're like playing on the good server or the bad server, because if you get good enough on the bad server, you just try your luck on the good server, even if you have higher ping on it. Like LA should have a server. It's ridiculous.
They did have a server. They moved it. And
yeah,
like
I know.
right now, NA has one server, and it's the bad server. Even at least if we have 2 servers, maybe at least
We're
one.
all on the bad server.
Yeah, we're all on
Exactly.
the bad server. It's ridiculous when you have Valorant, which is another Riot game with 20 different servers or so in North America, where it's making it so that the ping can be great for everyone. Come on, man. I mean, unless that changes, solo queue is never going to come better in North America, and North America is never going to take the next step in its, hope to making, a world's run.
Well, we are solving NA's problems here on Rift Rewind, our weekly ESPN Esports League of Legends program. That'll do it for this portion, or this show. But stick around, because in a matter of minutes, we are going to be back. If you're on Twitch, stay where you are. If you're watching us on any other platform, whether it's the ESPN app, Twitter, or on YouTube, head on over to twitch.tv/ESPN Esports, because you can participate in trivia with us in about 5 minutes time. Won't be too long. We're just going to make a couple of adjustments, and then we will be right back. If you're listening to us in podcast form, consider joining us in video form next week. But for all of you who are here for the Rift Rewind, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in a couple minutes for trivia.
I just want North America to be good, man. I just want North America to be good.